All season at this time, we are joined by our friend Jeff Howe from The Athletic. Jeff, as always, is on the Folsom Lake Honda hotline. Folsom Lake Honda, your one-stop Honda shop. Jeff, we appreciate your time. First question, your thoughts on the Steve Wilks hire by the 49ers today as the new defensive coordinator?
Love it. Absolute A-plus hire. And you can kind of see the writing on the wall for this one for the last, week to 10 days when the Panthers decided to go with Frank Reich, and they were going to give Wilks the opportunity to go elsewhere, even though he was still under contract. I mean, it made too much sense because you knew that D'Amico Ryans was going to the Texans. They needed a defensive coordinator. Steve Wilks is a really, really good coach. He's very well respected in the building. He's a tremendous leader. Losing D'Amico Ryans was going to hurt, but they knew that. And then to bring in somebody as professional as Wilks it's a best case scenario under the circumstances.
In your experience and all the years of watching and covering the NFL, do you find, I said this was my perception, Jeff, and I have no data to back it up, but do you find that offensive coordinators, when they leave high-powered offenses, are more missed than defensive coordinators when they leave top-notch defenses?
Oh, boy. That's deep right there. Good coaches are good coaches. So it's hard to say. I'm throwing like a small sample size at you, but like Bruce Arians leaving the Buccaneers was obviously a very difficult transition period for them. I think it could be a situation where you don't know how good you have it until you lost somebody.
Sure.
But it depends on who's running the system. I mean, the Patriots losing Josh McDaniels was a massive blow, but they hired a defensive coach to run their offense. So it's all about good coaching, good scheme, and good leadership, understanding the game, knowing how to adjust on the fly. It doesn't really matter what side of the ball it's on. It's just you need to have the right guy in place, I think, on either side of the ball.
Jeff Howe is with us here, Cattles Ramie, Sactown Sports. To stick with the Niners, Jeff, go back to them and talk about Kyle Shanahan. Obviously, great hire at the DC slot. But he said last week that he does not believe the Niners would be looking at a high-profile vet at quarterback. Do you think that they're going to kind of bypass bringing in competition and they're actually just going to stick with Purdy and Lance and hope for the best here?
That's what it looks like. And then you look at the veteran quarterback market. Now, obviously, you take Tom Brady off of it, and Aaron Rodgers probably seems unrealistic. So it's basically Derek Carr and Jimmy Garoppolo, and they essentially they did rule out Jimmy Garoppolo at their season-ending press conference. So are you going to kind of compete for Derek Carr money, or are you going to go all in on somebody like Daniel Jones? Like, I don't think so. You saw how successful they were with Brock Purdy this past season. What I would expect, there's a massive tier of like backup / fringe starting quarterbacks who are going to hit the free agency market that, maybe you make sure you solidify that number 3 job. But you've seen people like on Twitter, so you take it for what it's worth, but seen people criticize, well, the 49ers didn't have a good enough 4th quarterback situation or 5th quarter. When you get that deep into any area on the depth chart, you're going to struggle. But I think if you go into this knowing Trey Lance's injury history, knowing what Brock Purdy is going to go through this offseason, you want to make sure you have a veteran at the ready, even if it's just to buy you a week or two at some point in the season.
Were you surprised Tom Brady announced his retirement, and do you believe Tom Brady is actually retired?
I absolutely am. I was 100% surprised. How many times did we talk about it this season where I said I thought Brady was going to the Raiders, and I just didn't expect him to go out the way that he did. I understand it, but just knowing him, or as well as I got to know him over the back half of his career, I was stunned that he was ready to walk away. And do I believe he's still retired? I asked Rob Gronkowski today a question. It was more about him. I said, hey, he basically had been saying that he was retired and the door was closed. And I said, well, hey, what happens if Tom Brady decides he gets that 40-day itch like he did a year ago and he wants to come back and there's a good opportunity? And he says, hey, come play with me one more time. And Gronk said, no, the door's completely closed. And then he said, he kind of couched it toward the end because I don't think he wanted to speak for Tom Brady directly. but he said he didn't see Brady coming back either. So when somebody that close to Brady forecasts him to be fully retired, I got to take him at his word.
Jeff Howe from The Athletic is on the Folsom Lake Honda hotline. Folsom Lake Honda, your one-stop Honda shop. Jeff, I know you've done some reporting on Derek Carr. It was just reported out last hour that Carr is heading down to New Orleans for a visit. Where do you think he ends up?
Well, it's New Orleans and, I mean, maybe Atlanta, probably not, but like Tampa, probably not Carolina, but like you've got that whole belt of NFC South teams that need to do something at quarterback, whether it's through the draft or a veteran. I think the Saints make the most sense of that group, but then you've also got the Jets who are lurking, and they're now going to have to wait for Aaron Rodgers to go on a 4-day darkness retreat or whatever he's calling it to get some clarity there. So they're in a tough spot because Carr's situation has to be resolved in the next week, and Aaron Rodgers might not be out of the woods by then, literally. So it's, you got to make sure that you cover all your bases, but you also don't want to think that, hey, I want to go all in on Aaron Rodgers, lose Derek Carr if they potentially trade him, or, whatever happens with Garoppolo, and then find out that, hey, Aaron Rodgers either wants to retire or wants to remain with the Packers. So it's weird because of the timeline of it. Like usually you have a month to 6 weeks to build up your quarterback plan, but Carr's situation, knowing, with the contract February 15th, $40 million guaranteed, and not being the best quarterback on the market, if you assume that Aaron Rodgers is potentially available, it kind of just throws a whole wrench in this timeline.
Sean Payton introduced as the head coach of the Broncos yesterday, and he was asked about Russell Wilson's personal team and personal coach being in the building and sort of part of the Broncos organization. He said that's not happening under his watch. How do you see this thing working out with Sean Payton in Denver with Russell Wilson?
It's really interesting because we could fill up your entire show on this topic. I thought that was really interesting to hear Payton say that, and he has built up enough goodwill over the course of his coaching career to say, hey, this is how it's going to be. This is my way. I don't care what your quarterback says. Like, I'm the head coach. So taking control I think is the smart move, and I think it's going to make a lot of people in the building happy too. And I don't think you get to this point where Payton is comfortable taking that job if he didn't run that idea past the people he was interviewing with, and to know that he would be in their good graces if he did make such a bold move there. The other side of it is, I was asking people last week in Alabama at the Senior Bowl if they thought this whole thing was going to work. And they said, yeah, there is a path for it to work, but Russell Wilson's going to have to break some trends that he's kind of built up for himself over the last couple of years. He does have that entourage, if you will, like the personal team, the trainers and all that stuff that he has around him. But it's not just that, it's the mutual collaboration with the playbook. And, one of the things that kept coming up that I heard from, opposing executives, coaches, was he really wants to go down the field with the ball. Now, he throws one of the best deep balls in the league, but when you're on first and second down and these defenses are giving you these shell coverages and you've got a check down where you can get a 4 to 6 to 8, basically free yards, and he's bypassing those, then you kind of ruin an extension of the running game. And speaking of the running game, like, get more in. Like, you need this offense to really go off the back of Javonte Williams. And is Russell Wilson going to be okay with that? Because, again, the last 2-3 years, he's wanted to be more of a Tom Brady, more of an Aaron Rodgers, when his skill set is just different from those guys. And, if it was described to me another way, Rodgers and Brady can be those high volume passers. Like, you can put them into a game plan if necessary, where you say, all right, you guys, you might have to throw it 50 to 60 times today, but that can be okay when, again, you take those layups on first and second down, because it's an extension of your running game, because you're going to set yourself up for third and short to third and medium. But if you're just going to keep throwing those vertical routes, now this is a general assessment, like, this isn't universally true, but if you fall in love with the vertical game, especially on first and second down, it's going to make it a whole lot easier to go 3 and out, or to not have those extended scoring drives. And you saw that was a major issue with Denver last year. So Russell Wilson's going to have to be willing to adapt and kind of send his game back several years to where it was the more successful version of his game.
His name is Jeff Howe from The Athletic. Jeff, as always, thanks for giving us your time. It is much appreciated. We'll catch up with you next week to talk Super Bowl and more.